We're going to talk about the future of safety leadership culture. Thomas, I'll leave it to you to introduce our guests, including Andrew, if that's remote, and then we'll get the Fishbowl started.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Welcome back, everybody. And this is the typical thing after lunch, right? You're losing people who are sitting in the sun chair or still having on the nice little lawn, and they're sitting in the sun deck. So anyhow, we will rail them in as we go. A little bit about the framing of the session and why we were doing this session today is we are celebrating continuously the success of our safety performance. We are making leeways. We are getting better over the years by applying a lot of efforts, collective, individually, with human factors coming into the play more and more. And we're really making progress on that. But the question is, do we just continue that journey with, let's say, incremental improvements and just adding a few bits and pieces here and there? Or is there a possibility, an opportunity, or a need for actually looking at some breakthrough, some real different things? What are we missing maybe to break through the glass ceiling which we seem to have attained with a level of safety which might seem acceptable? So is there a need of doing some leapfrogging in the safety performance? And one thing I think out of personal experience over the years is we also focus on budgets, on performance, on short quarterly results and all that. All that we spend a lot of effort and time on a daily basis, and we're being judged by that, our performance, etc. But when the shit hits the fan and you have a major catastrophe, all those so important KPIs disappear from one day to the other. And the only focus we have then for the next 3 months is, why on earth did it happen? How did we get in the first place in that? And what we will do to avoid reoccurrence. So important shifts. And sometimes I wonder, are we really having the right KPIs, and are we looking at the right things when we measure ourselves? Because when the shit hits the fan, as I said, we immediately then let everything else drop and focus on safety. And we all have heard this morning when we talked about the future of work or the future of leadership. It's all about how we organize ourselves, how people work together, how they integrate. And what leadership is required in the future in order to address those huge challenges. Now, very interestingly, I don't know whether you followed it last week, the International Labour Organization, ILO, right? One of the biggest governing bodies, about 187 countries have subscribed to that International Labour Organization. They had 4 guiding principles. And last week only, they added a 5th fundamental principles for worldwide workers around the globe. Safe workplace. It only happened last week. Think about that. We had rules and principles about child labor, about quality, about health, but we did not have anything on safety. It only happened last week. So there's still ways to go on creating this zero-incident workplace, or making sure that everybody goes home unharmed and in one piece. In order to get the ball rolling, very happy to have a wonderful speaker panel here. So we have Muriel Barnier with us. Muriel is a safety expert. And we love experts, as we know, right? Safety expert, coming from many years in the oil and gas business and running her own firm now in Abu Dhabi. She won a number of international awards about safety programs she has developed, safety and specifically for the youth, so HSE and youth, which is an extremely exciting program with over 5,000 participants, still runs today worldwide. So she will share a bit her own perspective and views about what's the HSE of the future. The second panelist and second speaker is Andrew Sherman, Professor Andrew Sherman, who joins us from Switzerland. And again, thank you very much, Andrew. I know you have a lot of priorities on your plate for the moment. Joining us is really much appreciated. Andrew is also program director like Muriel in different of our safety leadership programs here. Runs a lot of sessions. He actually finished today leadership and safety digital session with over 70 participants from L'Oreal and Sanofi and others. So he's teaching and doing this at the same time. He has been authoring a number of books around safety. He is running one of the most important HSE conferences, or the most important HSE conference in Europe, which takes place in September in Berlin. and he has founded One Percent Safer, a not-for-profit organization, which you might want to Google and get some more information around. So thank you very much, Andrew, for being with us. And in order to have a bit of a fishbowl, we have Mr. Goltz, who joins us as the HSE manager. We have quite a lot of challenges in your organization on your hand. And I'm sure you're going to comment more about those challenges and what is on the paper and future for you. We have Xavier Bonton with us. Xavier is just left Total as the SVP for HSE worldwide and has a lot of experience. We have been collaborating for a number of years with Xavier. And look out, as of September, 6 podcasts about the vision on HSE prepared by Xavier will hit the network on CEDEP's social networks. Thanks for being us, and there's a lot of insights. You just came back from a big conference in Denmark about a very similar topic. And Philippe Delquier, he brings in the academic part of the HSE side. So Philippe is from Washington University, and he's specializing also in human performance, which becomes a more and more important element in HSE. And he's also a faculty in our leadership and safety program for many, many years now. So thank you very much, everyone, and over to Andrew and Muriel.
Thank you. Muriel, it looks like you're looking at me and I'm looking at you. So would you like to go first?
Okay, sure. Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everyone. Actually, I'm with my fish. I ignore the sharks. Okay, so, you know, I had prepared a little speech, actually. And then this morning, with the fishbowl, you know, that was happening, I was thinking, you know what, I'm just going to forget about everything I thought I would say, and I'm just going to improvise. And I've been inspired by hearing, you know, the future, and Dominique saying, I'm not sure he is, okay, saying, yes, here, well, actually, you know, we don't know about the future. We don't know what's going to happen, you know. We know one thing is that environment is going to be really important, right? Well, actually, safety is going to be the most important. And I do not have like some sort of prediction skills, you know. It's why environment is going to be so important, because it is threatening life. So at the end of the day, it's about safety. Right? And we take safety for granted often, but when like the pandemic happened, I mean, from one day to another, the world just shut down, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, the most important is definitely safety, and crises are moments of truth, right? A few years back, we were living in Houston, and we got hit by a hurricane. And we were in the house at night, and we had our 2 young kids sleeping upstairs. And the water started to come in the house. And guess what? I worried about my wood floor. I was thinking, oh no, the water is going to damage my wood floor, you know? And 2 hours later, we were swimming in our house, and the kids were sleeping upstairs, right? At that moment, I can tell you, you just don't care about your wood floor. You don't care about anything. You just want to be able to save the life of your kids. That's it, right? That's what safety is, right? And just for the little anecdote, we decided to leave the house, although 911 said, you know, you cannot leave, it's too dangerous, you need to go on the roof. We did not know how to go to the roof. We had this little plastic boat. We put the kids on the plastic boat, and we left the house swimming with the current. We took our kids, and we took our passport, our corporate laptop, and our corporate badge. Can you believe it? It's insane, right? It's completely insane, right? So when you have employees that are committed like this, and I don't think we were like more committed, You have employees that are so committed to the company. It is a huge responsibility, right? So my question I have for the future when I think about safety is, I'm just wondering, are we going to have more crises more often? What type of crises are we going to have? Natural disasters, pandemic, active shooters, events, you name it, you know? And my question, I'm wondering, and I'd like to know what you guys think about it, and Andrew, is adding more safety procedures is going to protect us? Is it, you know, more and more safety rules that is going to save us from these disasters and catastrophe? Because this is what we focus on, safety procedures.
So I'm happy to jump in on that one, Muriel. You said that you were thinking about predictions for the future and saying that you can't predict the future. I think we can. I think we can predict the future of safety. And I've got it for you here. I predict that next year, 2.8 million people will die in workplace accidents or work-related ill health. That's my prediction for 2023. And for 2024, I predict that 2.8 million people will die of workplace accidents and work-related ill health. And the same in 2025, and the same in 2026, and the same every year from now on. And I think the future of safety is perfectly predictable in that sense, because for the last 30 years, that's the number of people that have been dying in workplace accidents and work-related ill health. It hasn't changed. So if we hold that prediction for a moment and go to your question around, you know, how do we change the future? How do we change that negative prediction that I've just shared with you? Is it about more rules? Well, I don't think it is, because organizations around the world have been applying more and more rules. Safety has become legendary when it comes to rules. In every organization, when I ask leaders, have you got exactly the right amount of rules that you need for safety? Do you have not enough rules for safety? Or do you have too many rules for safety? Guess which one they answer. It's always the same, too many rules. And I think organizations have grown libraries of health and safety rules, and then they've added on top of that even more rules. Cardinal rules, golden rules, life-saving rules. You know, I was in a boardroom just a couple of weeks ago in one of the world's biggest oil and gas companies, and they were telling me about their golden rules. And I said, wow, how many do you have? And someone said, we got 5. And they were immediately corrected by someone who said, no, we've got 6. And then someone said, no, hang on, we've got 10. We've introduced a couple of extra ones. Nobody in the room was sure how many rules they had. And so I said, well, tell me about them. What's on these rules? And not a single member of the leadership was able to talk about what these golden rules were. And I think that there's been a fascination with rules and regulations in safety for too long. We've made safety too much about the process and not enough about the people. And so I hope that I get to revise my prediction. Instead of 2.8 million people dying this year, next year, and forevermore, I hope that this is the year where, perhaps thanks to COVID and this realization that we're all human and we're all working with humans, perhaps we'll start to see that we need to do something different with safety. We need to put people at the heart of health and safety, not rules and processes.
Can we chip in? So I'm Xavier. In my last job in Total as Total Energies as HSC SVP, we boiled down 230 group and branch rules to 40. So divided by 6. Now, you can only do this if you know what you're talking about, if you have very strong leadership, and you are making your rules a lot more explicit and with higher standards. And you can do this if you have an organization that is enabling benchmarking and continuous comparison. So this whole discussion is complex because it has to do with the strength of leadership, which, by the way, for me, safety is an excellent platform to exercise that strength. 2, to having an organization that allows the subject matter to be benchmarked internally, externally, and to have a few experts that can say this is appropriate. And I'll finish with another insight. Last year I asked 23,000 people in Total, and of that 30% contractors, to tell us about our golden rules. And management in Total, and I'm part of that, have been for decades, at least 15 years, saying these are our golden rules. They're easy, they're simple, there are 12, and obviously they work. And for the first time, in a big act of humility, my CEO said, let's have an Ipsos enquête. And we found out that of the 23,000, actually 70%, not more, knew those rules, but more fundamentally, 40% said they really thought they were very effective in preventing hazards. And actually, we asked them then, obviously, so what should we do? So let me just put on the floor that this whole discussion on rules is a management discussion, but when you bring it down to the base floor, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. And so it has to be done in a specific way. Team leaders locally in their language that use their examples to illustrate with time the showcases. But otherwise, handing out a rule will not work. So I think there's a future to safety and decreasing that number, Andrew, in turning around the puzzle. It's not doing in the typical way. And that's practice that I've seen successfully in the last years. So simplification is possible. It takes a lot of skin. But think about the base rules. They are not understood in all of our companies. I'm willing to place a bet.
Thank you for that. It's very interesting when you're talking about the saving living rules. We're just building this within the company. And one of the benchmark is what Total has done, to be honest, because I know they very well. It's interesting because when I start safety 25 years ago, and the safety today is completely different. The way we're approaching this one is completely different. We rely a lot on the procedure, on the process, on all which is written. And you know that today, and I want to ask the questions, I say to the people, I say the technology changed a lot. The technology had a new things which doesn't exist probably 25 years ago, which is artificial intelligence, which is developing a lot today as a support. And when I'm thinking about the 10 or the living saving rules, the rules that no one can break, because this is the topic, no one can break these rules. I think this technology could help us today to control this one, because we know that one shortcut on these rules could have, as a potential to have a fatality. And I'm not sure today, and this is the future of the health and safety, if this technology will help us in the future, or it will be against the safety because people rely that the technology will solve everything. So what's your mind about this one? Because I want to have your feedback on that.
Yes, thank you. That is fascinating because it will tie many things together, including the discussion this morning on the future of work. The future of work is very closely tied to the future of safety. Safety will be central, as you all mentioned. But you're right, what we want is not rules, we want behavior. We want good behavior. And rules are not going to give us that, because what we know is that what drives behavior, how decisions are made, there are three places where decisions are made. That's here, here, and there, right? And rules will tap into the calculation, I have to follow a rule and so on, but behavior will be determined by many other things. And what we know very well in education is that there are also three levels of things that you could do. There's knowledge, there's skills, and behavior. Knowledge is what you know. Skills is what you can do, what you know how to do. Behavior is what you actually do. They are not so connected. They are not necessarily so well connected. We tend to act on knowledge. It's a long shot, to get to really impact behavior from that. So we need to rethink many things. In fact, the way we educate people, we educate kids. We are giving them knowledge. That is a starting point. But knowledge it's easy to change knowledge, but it's also very temporary. Skills requires a commitment. To acquire skills and maintain them, you have to keep practicing, right? Otherwise, it's like muscle. Lose it or lose it. Use it or lose it, right? If you want to impact knowledge, you have behavior. You have to have a long-term commitment to that. You have to understand at a deeper level what is driving behavior and how knowledge can be brought to bear on behavior. And that is really the part often we're not focusing on enough. And I could give several examples of that, but I'll just share this for now.
Let me continue and we'll come back. It's fascinating to see Shell, the group Shell, when they put out their life-saving rules, it was about zero tolerance. Did it work? No. Now, the question is, how do you make a rule work on behavior? Exxon do this very well. They talk about the handicaps to speak up. What we do like Chevron, Total does like Chevron, is we use for workers graphs, no text, pictures, because we're not working with authors or academia, showing 10 principles in a rule. So work at height has 10 conditions. Now, when I was in Denmark in the conference Thomas talked about, I asked the audience, there were 300 people, in your companies, who measures compliance to rules? There were no hands. Had there been hands, I would have asked, who then communicates on compliance? No hands. I say this because it's easy. Total does this. Now, why do we do this like Exxon? Because we're never at 100%. And it's not around bashing the person who has not complied. It's about having staff speak up. What about a rule is difficult? What is a condition? And now Shell do this actually very well on process safety. SOPs, standard operating principles. It's enabling floor staff to say, what about the rule? And that is really very interesting as a discussion, because it's then enabling the speak up. And there are techniques to allow people to speak up. And yes, IT and cameras can help illustrate what people don't see, but we can talk about that clearly, I think.
So guys, let me challenge you here, right? I mean, we started this conversation and very quickly about safety, and very quickly we get stuck talking about rules, right? It's insane, right? Is rules, we're talking about, you know, how to get people to comply to the rules, right? We make safety about rules again, but safety is about the people. So companies come to me and say, here are our safety rules, how can we get our people to comply to our rules? What about if we were saying, here are our people? How can we build the rules together? How can we make it easy for them to follow the rules? How can we, yes, build it together? Take the other thing around. You know, just for a minute, if we could stop thinking about these rules, because in the future, I don't think they are going to save us. Again, when I called 911 and when I called the HSE manager that night, they say, go on the roof, don't go in the water. Wait for the helicopter to come and save us. Guess what? The helicopter called us 3 days later to come pick us up on the roof. 3 days later, they called us. So I'm glad we did not comply. That's what saved our life, I think.
You know, how do we get people to adhere more to the rules? We have to understand a little bit. I'm sorry? No, I don't want. I precisely do not want to talk about rules. And you know, I was trying to talk about behavior. How do we alter behavior without having rules necessarily? Why? Because you have to realize that for many people, safety is not nearly as obvious to understand as it seems. It seems like, of course, it is the right thing to do. But there's a cost to doing it, and there's a benefit. And people's behaviors and decisions will be driven by their own little cost-benefit analysis. And they see in a situation, should I put the gloves to do that? Maybe not. I can do it safely without, you know. There's all these small decisions, small and big, that safety in the end will be the sum of all these behaviors. So you need to understand what drives behavior. And when it goes to safety, you realize, oh, you're asking a lot of sophistication from people. Why? Because if I have to do something for safety, there's a cost to it. Immediately, there's an immediate cost. Okay, so I can measure, I can see the cost. What is the benefit? What is the pro? I'm reading in pros and cons. What is the pro? The pro is avoiding a possible bigger cost, a possible loss. So the pro, the benefit of safety is the absence of something bad, of something worse. And you're asking people to try to make decisions where, on one hand, the cost is visible, immediate, and on the other hand, the benefit is the absence of something worse. That is something very difficult for people to weigh in their minds, okay? It's not tangible, it is not, and so the question is, how do we turn this around? How do we help people frame and see through this so that they can reframe the absence of a loss as a gain, as a benefit? Because gains, you know, and tangible benefits is what drives behavior, what motivates people. How could you do those interventions? I think that some of the low-hanging fruits have already been collected, but there's a lot more to do about this to reimagine and reinvent safety in the workplace. And that wouldn't be by rules, that would be by understanding how behavior is going to be driven or determined in a particular situation, and the kind of cost-benefit analysis people are going to bring to bear on an issue. So, not about rules again.
Philippe, it's very interesting that you raised the point about the, let's say, I call return of investment for an accident or for safety. Because I think that something I'm struggled since years and years, I say, when you're talking about that, the financial say it's cost avoidance. It's cost avoidance. It's not tangible. And what is not tangible is not interesting me. What is interesting my finance, I hope that there is not a lot of people from finance in the room, but what is interesting me is tangible savings, not intangible. And that sometimes impact badly, I say, the safety culture within the company. And you're right, the rules, I don't believe that the rules is a solution at all for the safety. But it's a more simple way to start. When we have to start from something, you put the rules. But the rules don't make the difference between good and bad company in terms of safety performance. What makes the difference is the people behaviors, and the performance for the people. Because the biggest asset in a company is the people.
Let's just take a step back here. I mean, before we try to find some solutions as to how we get people to comply or how we create a world of work where we don't need safety rules, I think it's worthwhile just kind of reflecting on how did we get here? How did we get to a point where we've immediately started talking about rules and regulations? Why is it when we think of safety, our brains immediately go to rules and compliance and assurance and checklists? Now, I didn't get to campus this morning, so I don't know how many people were in the other sessions that you guys were at, but I noticed a lot of empty chairs here in the dome right now. And I wonder, is it because when people thought there's a safety thing on at 2 o'clock, they thought they could skip that? Because here's my take. I wonder if safety isn't quite as cool or as sexy or as fun or as engaging as you all think it is. I mean, you've turned up because you know safety is worth talking about. But I wonder whether safety suffers with a brand problem. I wonder whether when some people hear the words health and safety, they kind of pull back and think, that's not for me. That's for safety experts like Xavier and Stefan to do safety for the business. So I think we've got ourselves into this problem by talking about rules and regulations and statistics and accident trend rates and failure modes and effect analysis and fishbone analysis and corrective actions, and we've focused on failure. Safety is very much about focusing on failure, the traditional view of safety, right? Where we look at the number of times we failed, we call them accidents or incidents or near misses, and we say, let's try not to fail quite so much in the future, and let's try to fail 0 times and get to 0 accidents. So I think some of the language that we've used in the past has got us to a position where we're almost stuck in this dilemma of how to push forward. And I wonder whether, if we want to try to engage people's behavior differently, that means a rethink of the language, of the communication styles that we employ, of the perceptions around safety. Now, I don't know quite how we do that yet, but I'm pretty sure that in this group, we've probably got some great ideas. A final thought, just on this idea about return on investment, just to throw some more figures into the mix. The European Agency for Safety and Health at Work say it costs Europe 476 billion every year in workplace accidents and work-related ill health. In America, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration say that 23,000 on-the-job injuries occur every day in the United States. And it costs about $250 billion US every year. And the World Monetary Fund says that the annual cost to businesses in the United States, just the cost of workplace injuries alone, is greater than the gross domestic product of 91 countries. I mean, the costs of poor safety are mammoth. Yet I think we lose sight of those because those numbers are perhaps so big. They're hard for us to compress and to really get our heads around. So let's not be shy about talking about money and safety in the same conversation. I think it is worthwhile thinking about the cost of poor safety as well as the value that good safety brings.
Let me throw out two trends I see for the future and with respect to evolution. One is the fact that most of our companies tend to improve dramatically in terms of safety. Total in 2000 worked 450 million hours. There were 6,000 recordables that year. Last year, the same number of hours, there were 300. And everybody's trending towards zero. But I love the definition from the company Philips, who says the definition of performance is not the absence of accidents, it's the manifestation of impactful rituals that work in coherence on culture. And that's very true. And I think what I found most entertaining and interesting and motivating is when you get group leadership, when you get first level leaders to discuss about what are the impacts that they think are impactful, that are coherent, and how they use their imagination and their creativity as human beings to make them impactful, obviously with a given ambition, coherence. So there's a trend about how do you actually produce a lot more leading indicators or leading practices that are thoughtful, that are linked to management, and it's not safety management, it's all around human management. The second trend I see is this planet has an issue. And all of our companies are working on ESG. And ESG has 3 letters, and G stands for governance. But the paradigm is changing. Safety is about caring for our own troops, contractors, and staff. The society is expecting us to care for the environment and the local society connected to our companies. So the HSC of yesterday and today are evolving with not only a big E, but especially a lot to do with how they relate externally. And by the way, these are the same people. You know, they're not people that have an S and then an E and then an H. These tend to be HSC in all of our companies. And that is a second trend. And so why is this an issue? Because all of these renewable energies are taking a much larger footprint, land footprint, sea footprints. And that means that we have a lot of issues coming forward, front-end loading, and being able to connect with communities, stakeholders that are not internal. Those 2 issues to me are the ones that I can see my company working on, but I would think the same with yours.
I'm happy to hear, Xavier, finally the word caring. I don't know how, when we started the conversation, but we've been talking about rules, compliance, statistics, money, and finally we come to the word caring, right? And again, safety is about the people, right? And this morning we heard a lot about the younger generations and everybody, the need to connect, the relationships, the caring factor, right? This, to me, is still not there yet. We feel like we care for the people, but again, when the shit hits the fan, that's the moment of truth, and then everybody tries to cover themselves. That's what we see very much still, right? So I still hear the problem is the behavior of the people. And we need to stop seeing the people as being the problem and start to see them as being the solution, right? If you see people as being the problem, and I'm talking about the leaders of the companies, it means that there is a lack of trust and psychological safety. And if people do not feel safe psychologically, they will hide. And there is nothing worse in safety than hiding issues, right? If you have green KPI dashboards for safety, you should not be sleeping well at night. If they have been green, if your dashboard has been green for too long, you should not be sleeping well at night. It means that either you have the wrong KPIs or either the people are hiding, right? And the catastrophe may be around the corner. Now, just one anecdote, and that's basically to build psychological safety, and that should be the focus of the leaders of the companies, we need to develop emotional intelligence, and that's why we make it such a big focus in the leadership and safety program level 2. So last year, just a little anecdote, I was in Saudi leading a safety leadership program with Saudis. And at the end of the day, one of the operational VPs, a Saudi guy, he came to me and he told me, now I understand that I need to care for my people. But how do I do to care for my people? And I was shocked when he said that, right? How do you do to care for people? I don't know, there's nothing here. I mean, just go by your heart, you know? How can you not care for the people, right? And I didn't know what to answer to this question. And this question stuck with me for a while, right? We tell people you need to care for your people, and everybody's like, yes, yes, I know how to care for my people. And I was like, finally, one guy that has a good question. How do I do to care for my people? You know, at first I was like, this guy has no heart. You know, Saudis, I mean, this part of the world, you know, you fall into cliches, stupid cliche, you know. No, I think he had a very good question, actually. This question stuck with me. And after a while, I think I had an answer. And the answer is simple. How to care for our people, really. It's to connect with them. It sounds stupid, easy, too silly, you know? But let me tell you something. I live in Abu Dhabi. If last week you had heard that a French lady in Abu Dhabi died in a car crash, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't have cared, right? If next week you hear a French lady dies in a car crash in Abu Dhabi, and you hear that it's me, I think it's gonna do something to you. You know? What happened in between last week and next week? We had this moment of connection together, right? So I really want to challenge ourselves. How can we truly connect, have such a connection with our people that we really, really cannot stand the thought of them being hurt, basically? Welcome to our new fish.
Yeah, I was hearing the conversations, and I wanted to throw a couple of curveballs, because I felt the discussion was very much about, you know, activities, physical, in the fields, into a very specific environment. On that particular front, I got two anecdotes. And the first one is I'm wearing my wedding rings on my neck because I was not properly trained and I almost ripped my finger. And the second is, despite my young age and my eyes, I don't have any back problem because I got some training. So those are the facts which are for me important in terms of the training and the caring and showing the example of why it is important. Now, we're making the connection with what we discussed earlier on today in terms of the new hybrid environment. There is a big question that I'm asking myself on a regular basis is, companies have made a great effort to create a space which is safe for the employee to work in the office. Ergonomic questionnaires and all those kind of things are being rolled out. Now, all those employees are being sent home. Now, how many of us are still sitting on the kitchen table, working into an environment which is not ergonomically? What is the rate of back problems and situations that we are facing? And working as well for now a smaller organization that you used to work for, the dependency on people can topple an organization. And therefore, the care, as you said, and ensuring that the employees understand the benefits of taking care of their health, and coming from a different background, hearing that, again, an employee wanted to go the extra mile, rent a car, and crashed himself because he didn't sleep enough, was just tearing me apart. So I think it's going, there is that aspect of, yes, the physical aspect, which is the obvious and what we see, and the aspect, but there is also the less visible and the more rampant, and which in large organizations may have a very high impact on moral, because when people are hurt in their bodies, they are not happy. If they are not happy, then the whole thing kind of goes down. So there is those rules that are being to be implemented, and indeed, as you said, KPIs and money and return on investments are very important from a managerial perspective, but those are not related to the people, and doesn't mean anything to them. And it is always a challenge. And when I was a young engineer and I was managing a French crew of welders and pipe fitters, explaining them to wear goggles after the third guy was going to the ER and they're still not getting it was really frustrating. But it is, how do we work on that messaging at the ground level? And I think, as you said, using pictures, something which is very simple and straightforward, people can understand, is one of the ways. But that's always a challenge.
You highlight a very good point. I'm just thinking about what you're talking about. You're right. Safety is taking care about people. Definitively, that's where we have to focus. It's interesting what you said, regarding the health and safety for the future. We are moving the health and safety from the professional side to the private side more and more now, and the COVID situation showed that. So the organization has to adapt now to that way, which is coming more and more, and the future it will be probably the separation between private life and as a professional will be thinner and thinner in the future, because the technology could help, because we can work for any place, anywhere. So I would like just to know, just to think about what do you think about that evolutions from a safety standpoint of view for workplace to a private sphere where we have to control that one, or we want to control, or we want to take care about the people for that. And this is something which is quite new now in the evolution of the future of the safety. So the safety won't be only around the boundary of the company, it will be much more wider now, and we have to think about that for the future.
No.
Hi, I'm Mark. I would like to ask you folks something about safety thinking and how it embeds in your behavior. It starts with a true story. Last Sunday night, we had an immense storm in the center of France. I left a friend's house at 10 minutes of 10, just after a hailstorm. I went 200 meters down the road and came across a branch. Got out of the car, moved the branch. Another 100 meters down the road, it was a tree. I could not move the tree. Someone came from the other direction, and between the three of us, we moved the tree. Now, I would like to know, at that point, would you have turned your car around and gone back to the safe haven, or would you have continued 40 kilometers down the road to your house?
You're touching a point on blindness, partial blindness, total blindness to risk.
I would be grateful if you would continue that.
And so my practice is that when you observe different forms of blindness in companies, you think about how do you alleviate, how do you diminish the blindness. And in many cases, you can see many accidents linked to that type of blindness, from complacency, shortcuts, standardized shortcuts, etc. I think what we've seen work the best is when you huddle up. Huddle up. If I ask these 100 people to say, hey, we're looking at Andrew in his office, is there a risk? And everybody will say yes and no and all shades of gray. But when you discuss about it, then you get connected, you get caring, and you talk about, hey, is the tree worth pulling, or is it better to go back, or you should come in my car? And all the avenues are there. So at least in my company, we tend to bundle up. We do this with contractors. And I'll tell you why. Because contractors are, at least in oil and gas, but in many companies, seen as the sous-traitants. Sous-traitants, which is not a very nice way to call your partners in life. And I tend to value contractors because, frankly, safety is a condition of employment. They learn it the hard way. They see the internals of our companies better than ourselves. But if you allow them to actually talk and share and bundle in safety tours and observations, hip to hip, you get all the benefits of insights, sharing experience, speak up. Nobody climbs up on the floor place. And when this is institutionalized, it's very powerful. And it's a code of language and practice. So my message is, in terms of caring and in terms of awareness, the risk, the best solution is, I don't have all the knowledge, but I know with Philippe, probably would go a long way looking at safety in this room versus my own. Just a thought.
I'd like to make the story more complicated. You get a phone call from your neighbor who says, all hell is breaking loose here. The Velux have been smashed by hail. I can't find your cat. You've got to come home. You continue down the road, and there's another tree. Do you turn around and go back? Do you stop in the nearest village?
I'll give you my answer. You want to test another answer? Those who practice emergency response have the techniques and the reflex. When you look at all setups of emergency response, these are pre-organized facilities, protocols, exercising, and when you don't have that, you go back to the shack. You do huddle like, I would not carry on. I would go back, personally, because I know what I'm talking about when I go back with my friends home. I don't know what's in front of me, especially when you cannot predict. My answer.
I did not follow that advice on Sunday night, but I would now.
Exactly. And you're here. The reason you're here today, was it because you made a good decision, or you made a bad decision and you were lucky? And distinguishing between the two is not obvious, because often what we observe are outcomes, and attributing these outcomes to either luck or lack of luck, or proper behavior or good decision making is far from obvious, and we need to reflect on that. But the last reflection that I have is, it is amazing that it seems to be such an uphill battle to get people to embrace safety, to change their behavior, to do all this. And what is the time of life where we as humans are beginning to function somewhat autonomously and make very important decisions that determine our safety and well-being? And we tend to feel very fearless about it. It's when we're in teenage years. It's when we hit adolescence that where a lot of behaviors now, as parents, we are very worried about that. Don't do this, don't do that, be careful about this and that. We know all the traps. And to me, it is interesting that we have all those efforts done in the corporate world for good reason, but we should begin much, much earlier. We should really think about how do we get people to embrace safety, to understand at a higher level of rationality the consequences of their actions, and do that kind of little cost-benefit, risk-benefit analysis. You can never get it perfect. You can never get it right. You will never have 100% correct answers to puzzles such as the one that was just shared with us. But if you have augmented your rationality or your skills of thinking about it to a higher level, you will statistically augment, of course, and improve things. So that's my bold proposal. Let's start safety training with teenagers in high school or even slightly before.
Thank you. I've heard so many great principles, and I can't agree more with all that has been said so far. And thank you, Philippe, because you clearly pointed out that we have knowledge. Sometimes it's lacking. We don't know what is right, what is safe. The beginning of the pandemic actually told us, we taught us a number of those lessons. Then you have skills. Do we have the capabilities to do it or not? And then there is behavior. Now let's take a simple example from outside the corporate world. Why? Everybody would know that smoking is bad for our health, right? And sometimes I wonder, why do people still smoke? It's their choice. They know it's not the right thing to do, but they still think that maybe they can bear with it, live with it. There are so many other risks. And when we get to collective safety, sometimes there is a trade-off between what is safer for everybody if everybody did the same thing versus individual behavior. Your example was also fantastic. Not following the rules and jumping in the water was the right thing for you to do. But if everybody did the same thing, would it have been good for everybody? Driving is the same thing. If you drive faster than others, it's good for you. And some people have that overconfidence that it's not going to happen to me, but it happens only to the stupid drivers who don't know how to drive fast. So that's the dilemma. How do you deal, once we have the knowledge and the training, with individual choices who sometimes think that what will cost me if I comply is for someone else's benefit and I'm not gaining directly from it? And if my choice statistically is to take that risk, is it my responsibility or is it the company's responsibility? And that's why corporations have to put rules. Where would you put the limit?
I can just add something interesting. I think that for the safety and what I'm struggling a couple of years is how the people could put safety in their personal values, because that drives the behavior for the people. And I think the answer regarding smoker, regarding accident, when you believe the people just make stupid things, try to understand what is the value of safety for you personally. Is it part of a DNA, and how you want to change that? And I don't have the answer today, to be honest. I don't know regarding behavior point of view how we can influence that. But this is probably sometimes the explanations about your questions, why the people are still smoking today, and we know everybody knows that it will kill you. So I don't have the answer, and I just ask the questions, especially for the behavior point of view, how you can influence this, how to do that.
Well, actually, if I can jump in here on this idea of smoking, I was talking about it with someone this morning, actually, and it's remarkable, isn't it? We see cigarette packets with pictures of diseased lungs or diseased gums or all sorts of things. And the most explicit statements, they're essentially saying, you're going to die if you smoke these cigarettes, yet still people light up. Well, why is it? It's because it's not guaranteed that they're going to die right now while they smoke the cigarette. And the desire to get that nicotine rush or the hit from smoking is much greater than the perceived chances of them dying with lung cancer or whatever the image is in on the box. And I think if we consider this carefully, whilst there's a negative consequence, apparently, from smoking, it's delayed. It's not now. It's not in the immediate future. At some point down the line. But it's also uncertain. It's not guaranteed that if I smoke this cigarette, I'll get lung cancer. And most smokers that I've ever asked will tell me, oh, my grandmother smoked 40 cigarettes a day and she lived to be 123. So smokers tend to have an anecdotal evidence that smoking doesn't kill everybody. So this balance off between the positive consequence, the soon certain and positive consequence of the nicotine versus the delayed, uncertain and negative consequence of lung cancer, that's a choice that smokers make. And I guess it's obvious to us, given that there are still smokers on the planet, that the soon certain positive consequence of nicotine hit or enjoying the smoke is much greater than the person's perceived risk of catching lung cancer.
So I have a question bouncing off Andrew's point about branding around safety, and Muriel, your point about caring, and then the overall theme of future and leadership. And based on my own observations in this space for the last 20 years, I would venture to say that the HSE function is probably the most neglected corporate function from a talent management point of view. And so I'd love to hear from the experts what your vision is of the future of the, and Xavier, let's pretend you're still in the fishbowl. What's your vision for the future of the HSE function?
And hi, Fish, I'm just going to ask for quick replies to that very important question so that we can keep everything on track. But please close with the comments.
Sure.
I can kick off. The three roles in HSE professionals. One is to be knowledge-based. They know the rules, internal, external. Two is to be the very clean mirror, say things as they are. Three is to be coach. Boss, this is how we can approach. Now, once you have these three rules in mind, I think then the question is, how effective is that person going to be? That function. And I believe they're a lot more effective when they are a mix of two kinds. The operational experience, people know what they're talking about, those that have gray beards and that have been around, and those that are on technical ladders, safety experts, because they have tested all the tools. That combination is very powerful. Tomorrow it takes now a third dimension, which is growing in companies. It's the external focus, the society, caring for the community, stakeholder relations. And that means you know how to talk about the biodiversity in simple words. So I see three dimensions going forward, the third being rather new.
But still the question remains, if any of you in the room you don't work for the HSE function, if your company tomorrow tells you, hey, you're moving to a new job and it's going to be HSE, what's going to be your reaction? Yeah. What did I do wrong? Why am I being punished?
That may have been true. That would have been true 10, 20 years ago. In a number of companies, it is not the case. Why? Because these are passing, corporate companies know the importance of the role. You don't profile HSE and say, by the way, let's put those who are needless. I really think this is changing.
You're right, Xavier. This is exactly that. I say in Move 24 years ago, I say for punishment situations where, health and safety is necessary for the company to be successful, because I don't want to say that, but more and more disaster we'll have in the future, more and more the health safety will be important. And the people understand that with the COVID situation, what's happened around the world, and they understand clearly that the health and safety is something you need to be successful in the business.
Because it's about the people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But what does it look like to be a successful HSE professional? And who's taking care of the HSE professionals in terms of their career development?
I think Joanna raises a really good point here. I think what it looks like to be a really good HSE professional is the CEO coming into your office to say, you've done such a great job here, we're going to have to let you go because all of the operational leaders are doing safety in this business now, and we don't need you. I think that's the ultimate success for an HSE professional.
But that's fascinating, Andrew. Do you think, so let's take a parallel of that then. It's for the legal function, are you going to walk in and say, you know what, we haven't been sued for 10 years, so I'm going to let you go? Or finance, we're going to let you go. So, are you suggesting that the HSE function, therefore, has to be treated differently from the other functions, that necessarily it has to be treated differently?
Not at all. I'm suggesting, in fact, what I think is the opposite of what you're saying. Let me be clear. The absence of accidents does not mean the existence of safety. Yeah. So just because we haven't had an accident doesn't mean that we're successful and the HSE person has done their job. I think safety is about the presence of input behaviors, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, and those input behaviors need to come from the operational leaders. Every manager, every leader in the business is responsible for safety. I think it's been delegated for too long to the ops department. So I'm being slightly tongue-in-cheek when I say the ultimate objective, the ultimate mark of success is the HSE leader is lead redundant. But I think that's my ultimate hope, is that organizations recognize the value of safety, the responsibility of every leader for safety, and that we upskill leaders in their ability to lead with safety rather than relying on the department that's been charged with telling us what safety is. And to finalize the answer for you, I think health and safety leaders have been neglected. I think that department has been neglected in the corporate world for a long time. But what I'm seeing now is the trend that Xavier and Stefan have talked about, where high-level business leaders are coming in to bring business acumen and real leadership strength to the OSH department, or OSH leaders are getting some of that development. So I think I'm seeing the same trend that the guys have just mentioned.
Now, before we go on, and I know we have a new fish, and of course we respect, because we must, given that you've had the courage to get up here. Straight after this, we're going to coffee break. If you check your watches, where we are right now, we're coming back at past. Okay, so the coffee break gets shortened in order to round off this very important conversation. And it's not to say we shouldn't finish quickly, but you know who's waiting, okay?
Okay, so I'll be quick. Just a comment. I thought it was interesting. I saw recently that Plastic Omnium merged the HSE and sustainability function. So maybe that's also a trend that could go into that direction. Yeah.
In oil and gas, they're separating them now, the two functions.
Big round of applause to everybody, and you included.